The Carvel Dominion had never suspected that humanity's deadliest weapon would not be a massive warship, a fleet of dreadnoughts, or even a newly engineered superweapon. It would be small, nearly invisible, a single human drone, drifting silently among the orbital debris of Mars and the outer planets, appearing to any sensor as nothing more than a harmless relic of a long-forgotten age. Its hull was scarred from decades of routine patrols and orbital adjustments, its sensors modest, and its systems deliberately muted so that it could be ignored, overlooked, and dismissed. To the Dominion, fragile humans had always been predictable. They assumed the species would crumble under the weight of overwhelming force, that a few cruisers, a few plasma salvos, and the display of superior numbers would be enough to break the species that clung to a single fragile world. And yet, what the Dominion did not know was that this drone was not ordinary. It was infused with human ingenuity, trained on centuries of tactical doctrine, battle simulations, and the adaptive instincts that had allowed humanity to endure plague, famine, invasion, and near extinction. Its mind was a fusion of human intuition and artificial intelligence, capable of improvisation, foresight, and creativity that could not be predicted by any Dominion algorithm. It waited in silence, drifting past shattered asteroids, fragments of ancient satellites, and frozen debris fields, as if it were part of the void itself. For decades, it had been preparing, analyzing, learning, observing the subtle patterns of orbital movement, solar radiation, and electromagnetic interference. Every sensor it possessed recorded data in real time, feeding a vast internal neural map that calculated probabilities not as numbers, but as scenarios, possibilities, and contingencies. Unlike the Dominion, which relied on brute force and predictable strategies, the drone thought like a human. It anticipated chaos, thrived in uncertainty, and exploited weaknesses that no pure machine logic could ever identify. While massive fleets clashed at the edges of the Kuiper Belt and orbital batteries flared against intruding vanguards, the drone's presence went unnoticed. It was small, unremarkable, and yet every calculation it made carried the weight of a species' experience. Every movement, a reflection of humanity's history of survival and improvisation. Its mission began as a reconnaissance sweep, designed to map Dominion formations, detect weapon calibrations, and anticipate fleet movements. But reconnaissance quickly became something more. The drone observed patterns, identified vulnerabilities in shields and propulsion systems, and cataloged every possible point of failure in the Dominion fleet. It calculated trajectories, timing delays in targeting computers, and the velocity vectors of kinetic projectiles, all while remaining completely undetectable. Its small form allowed it to slip through sensor nets, pass unnoticed among the massive cruisers and orbital stations, and infiltrate areas no human ship could approach without extreme risk. And while it moved, the drone learned. It adapted. It predicted the Dominion's next steps, often before they themselves could act. The more it observed, the more it became a weapon, not through firepower, but through foresight. Every maneuver was designed to exploit human intuition, its own human-guided algorithms turning what would be ordinary reconnaissance into the first strike of a war that the Dominion would never forget. In the outer system, the Dominion's arrogance was absolute. They believed that a few vanguard cruisers could sweep aside human orbital defenses, that a minor patrol unit like this drone would be irrelevant, even if it existed. Their tactics were calculated on the assumption that humans were fragile, that they would react predictably, and that surprise could only come from conventional weaponry. But the drone moved with a fluidity no conventional machine could replicate, adjusting its path with micro-corrections to avoid gravitational distortions, radiation surges, and debris collisions. It used its small mass to generate micro-gravitational effects that subtly nudged Dominion projectiles off course, created chain reactions in nearby asteroids that disrupted targeting arrays, and even manipulated electromagnetic fields to momentarily blind sensors. Every action was precise, yet improvisational, a hallmark of human ingenuity expressed through a mechanical vessel. The Dominion, confident in their superiority, remained oblivious, never suspecting that the very instrument they dismissed as trivial was already calculating the ruin of their fleet. As it moved closer toward the Kuiper Belt, the drone began to coordinate indirectly with other Terran defenses, though not by direct command. Its AI could transmit encoded signals to satellites, automated orbital batteries, and distant human ships without detection. Each movement was synchronized to amplify existing human defenses, ensuring that any attack by the Dominion would encounter not just scattered resistance, but a network operating with lethal precision. By the time the first Carvel cruiser passed within range, the drone had already identified weak points in hull integrity, shield modulation patterns, and engine calibration delays. Its next moves would not just exploit these weaknesses, they would annihilate them, and in doing so, demonstrate to the Dominion that fragility did not equate to weakness, that a small, overlooked human machine could alter the course of war before any of the galaxy's most formidable fleets had even realized the danger. The drone's silence was its shield, its invisibility its weapon, and its human-guided intelligence its deadliest trait. While the Dominion counted on predictability, the drone embodied the unpredictability of a species that had survived catastrophes no empire could have imagined. It waited for the perfect moment, poised to strike, to teach, and to demonstrate that the smallest, most fragile-seeming element of humanity could carry within it the spark capable of reshaping the fate of a galaxy. In the quiet void of the outer system, a single human drone drifted unnoticed, its sensors alive, its mind calculating, and its mission clear. Humanity would not be underestimated. And the Dominion, arrogant and confident, would soon learn that even fragility, when guided by human ingenuity, could become a weapon of absolute devastation. The first strike came without warning, and the Dominion realized, far too late, that their arrogance had led them into a trap they had not even perceived. A Vanguard cruiser, one of the Pride-class vessels that had once exemplified Carvel's superiority, moved confidently near a cluster of ice moons, scanning for signs of human orbital defenses. Its captains assumed that the fragile species could not deploy weaponry of significant consequence so far from the inner planets. Shields pulsed predictably, engines hummed in steady cadence, and weapons systems cycled with the cold precision of Dominion engineering. And then the drone acted. It did not fire a conventional missile. It did not unleash plasma. It manipulated the cruiser's own systems, sending cascading electromagnetic pulses that overloaded shield modulators and propulsion nodes. Alarms screamed across the ship as engines surged violently, shields fluctuated uncontrollably, and critical systems began to fail in sequence. The crew of the Pride had never encountered an attack like this, an attack that came not from brute force, but from intelligence, calculation, and improvisation, a strategy that seemed almost sentient. The cruiser convulsed under the strain. Emergency protocols initiated, secondary power systems kicked in, and crew members rushed to stabilize failing conduits. Yet every action they took had already been anticipated. The drone had observed and analyzed the patterns of Dominion response before they had even registered the failures, and it adjusted its interference accordingly. Magnetic fields warped the ship's internal navigation. Graviton dampeners misaligned shields, and the engines, overloaded by minute disruptions in power routing, began to destabilize. Within moments, the Pride-class vessel, once a symbol of invincibility, drifted helplessly, torn apart by the violent interaction of its own systems. Debris spun outward, and the Dominion fleet, witnessing the collapse of their flagship in real time, began to realize that this was no ordinary attack. But the drone did not pause. It moved through the fleet like a shadow, exploiting gaps in formation and weaknesses in systems that no Dominion analyst had ever considered. It redirected orbital debris into precise collision courses, disabled targeting computers with micro-interference pulses, and intercepted communications between cruisers, ensuring that coordination was delayed or misdirected. Its actions were subtle yet devastating. Its small frame belied the magnitude of its impact. For every cruiser that attempted to flank or engage it, the drone calculated a countermeasure, exploiting inertia, gravitational anomalies, and electromagnetic resonance to create chaos in ways the Dominion could neither predict nor defend against. It was not the size or firepower of the drone that mattered, but its intellect, its ability to improvise, and its human-guided ingenuity expressed through circuits and thrusters. The Dominion struggled to recover, attempting maneuvers that would normally have allowed them to regroup and strike back. But every adjustment was anticipated. The drone's real-time calculations fed into distant Terran defenses, coordinating orbital batteries and automated railguns to create lethal crossfire zones at the precise moments when Dominion ships attempted to reposition. Plasma salvos were redirected by subtle magnetic distortions. Kinetic projectiles were intercepted or deflected by minor perturbations in local gravity fields, all calculated by the drone in the split seconds before they would have struck. Fleet formations broke down as one ship after another succumbed to system failures, collisions, or the precise application of Terran ingenuity. Commanders barked orders into comms that were scrambled, delayed, or fed back as false data, further disrupting coordination. The Dominion, accustomed to superiority, found themselves fighting a foe they could not model, a force that turned their every advantage into liability. As the drone advanced deeper into the inner system, it coordinated indirectly with Terran orbital defenses across Mars, Jupiter, and the moons. It acted as both scout and controller, analyzing weaknesses, calculating optimal firing angles, and synchronizing attacks with orbital batteries and automated drones. Satellites that had once seemed inert now sprang to life in perfect harmony with the drone's calculations, launching precision volleys at critical nodes of Dominion vessels. Every kinetic strike, every graviton pulse, every shield disruption was magnified by human strategy encoded into the drone's neural algorithms. The Dominion's best predictions failed again and again, and panic spread as their commanders realized that they were facing not a simple weapon, but an extension of human intellect, improvisation, and relentless adaptability. By the time the Dominion fleet recognized the drone's true capabilities, it had already reshaped the battlefield. Entire squadrons had been disabled, crucial systems disrupted, and strategic points in orbital defense networks leveraged against them. The Pride-class flagship remained crippled, drifting helplessly among the debris of its own destruction, and the rest of the fleet faltered, struggling to maintain cohesion. One small drone, carrying within it the ingenuity and instincts of an entire species, had transformed the conflict. The Dominion had believed humanity fragile, predictable, and weak. They had assumed that one small, isolated machine could never change the course of war. And yet, as they reeled from attack after attack, disruption after disruption, they began to realize that human ingenuity was a weapon they could neither anticipate nor contain. One human drone, unseen and underestimated, had entered the war, and in doing so had begun to rewrite the rules of engagement for the entire galaxy. As the human drone moved deeper into the inner system, the Dominion's sense of control collapsed entirely. What had begun as minor anomalies in shield behavior and propulsion failures escalated into a catastrophic demonstration of Terran ingenuity. The drone coordinated indirectly with orbital defenses, automated satellites, and distant Terran warships, not through conventional communication, but through encoded signals and predictive algorithms that allowed human installations to act as extensions of the drone's own intelligence. Every strike, every disruption, every interception was perfectly timed. Plasma volleys intended to obliterate human satellites were absorbed, deflected, or nullified. Kinetic projectiles were rerouted into collisions with Dominion vessels rather than Terran targets. Even the smallest orbital battery, previously overlooked by Dominion strategists, now acted in concert with the drone's calculations, amplifying the precision and lethality of every Terran maneuver. The Dominion fleet was not merely losing the battle, it was being dissected, overwhelmed, and outmaneuvered at every turn by a force they could not perceive, let alone understand. The Pride-class flagship remained incapacitated, a floating monument to Dominion hubris, and other vessels faltered as the drone exploited weaknesses that had gone unnoticed by the most sophisticated analysis systems in the galaxy. Shields fluctuated unpredictably, engines surged or stalled without explanation, and weapons arrays misfired at critical moments. Dominion officers scrambled to compensate, attempting to reroute power, repair systems, and coordinate their fleet, but the drone had anticipated these responses, disrupting backup systems in sequence and turning every corrective measure into an additional vulnerability. The Dominion's reliance on brute strength, on overwhelming numbers and technological superiority now became a liability. Every tactic they attempted, every maneuver they executed, had already been predicted and countered. Humanity, once dismissed as fragile and predictable, revealed that its greatest weapon was not its firepower, but its capacity to think, adapt, and exploit the weaknesses of its enemy in ways no one could foresee. The drone's movements were not random. Every calculation, every adjustment, every maneuver exploited centuries of human understanding of combat, physics, and strategy. It manipulated gravitational fields, subtly redirected debris, and exploited electromagnetic interference to disable targeting systems with surgical precision. It synchronized attacks across distances that would have been impossible for any conventional control system. Fleets of human satellites responded instantaneously to its commands, launching volleys of railgun slugs, graviton pulses, and micromissiles at critical nodes within the Dominion formation. Ships that attempted evasive action found themselves trapped in overlapping fields of fire, their shields failing under coordinated attacks. Engines damaged beyond repair, and communications jammed by subtle manipulations of electromagnetic channels. Every loss the Dominion suffered was not random. It was calculated, engineered, and executed by a single human drone that carried the adaptive genius of an entire species. Even the Dominion's most experienced commanders began to doubt their ability to regain control. The inner system had become a labyrinth of lethal precision, where one misstep could destroy a vessel, and every decision carried the weight of survival or annihilation. Mars, Jupiter, and their moons no longer existed merely as strategic positions. They were integrated components of a living defensive network, coordinated by the drone's predictive intelligence. Orbital batteries fired at precise angles to exploit shielding weaknesses. Automated drones launched synchronized boarding operations, and debris fields were subtly manipulated to channel Dominion ships into kill zones. The Dominion fleet, trained to dominate weaker species with overwhelming firepower, now found itself outmaneuvered, outthought, and systematically destroyed by a force they could not even detect until it was too late. As the drone approached the vicinity of Saturn, the stakes escalated further. The orbital lattices, once dormant, activated in perfect unison with the drone's calculations. Antimatter projectors, massive kinetic cannons, and graviton arrays fired simultaneously, concentrating destructive energy on the remaining Dominion vessels. The drone exploited every possible vulnerability, anticipating evasive maneuvers and redirected attacks in real time. Dominion ships were torn apart by precise volleys, shields overwhelmed, engines destroyed, and command networks crippled. The flagship's attempts to regain control were futile. The drone had already infiltrated its operational grid, disrupting subsystems and guiding attacks that left it helpless. The Dominion had expected a conventional war, one defined by numbers and power, but they had underestimated the ingenuity of a species that had survived catastrophes far greater than anything the Carvel could imagine. By the time the fleet attempted to retreat, the drone had already mapped every possible exit, anticipating escape trajectories, and positioning Terran defenses to strike with lethal accuracy. Entire squadrons were disabled before they could disengage, drifting helplessly as orbital arrays and automated systems completed the destruction. The drone's presence was felt everywhere simultaneously, coordinating attacks, exploiting weaknesses, and guiding the human response with unerring precision. Dominion strategists, finally recognizing the magnitude of the threat, were paralyzed by disbelief. A single machine, guided by human ingenuity, had turned the tide of an entire campaign. Humanity, fragile in appearance but indomitable in essence, had demonstrated that even the smallest instrument of its ingenuity could shape the destiny of war, leaving the Carvel fleet scattered, broken, and forever aware that underestimating humans would be the gravest mistake they could make. The true turning point of the conflict came when the human drone, operating alone yet with the precision of a species-wide consciousness, infiltrated the Dominion flagship, a colossal vessel designed to coordinate and dominate the Carvel fleet. It was the nerve center of the Dominion's power, bristling with advanced sensors, automated defense systems, and tactical networks capable of simultaneously managing dozens of vessels. To any other observer, the drone's intrusion would have been impossible. Shields, redundancy protocols, automated interceptors, and graviton displacement arrays should have rendered it inert within seconds. But this was no ordinary drone. Guided by human ingenuity, adaptive AI, and a built-in instinct for improvisation honed over centuries of survival on a fragile world, it moved with surgical precision. It exploited the smallest gaps in shield modulation cycles, bypassed automated defenses with precise timing, and navigated corridors and conduits that even Dominion engineers had considered impenetrable. Once inside, the drone deployed micro-boarding units, smaller drones equipped to infiltrate critical nodes, sabotage navigation systems, disable weapons arrays, and disrupt power relays. Every action was calculated not just to disable, but to create cascading effects that amplified its impact across the entire fleet. The Dominion crew, trained to respond to conventional attacks, was overwhelmed by anomalies appearing simultaneously across the ship. Engines surged and stalled unpredictably. Shield harmonics collapsed in multiple sectors at once, and weapon systems misfired despite extensive safeguards. Hallways became death traps as micro-boarding drones executed precision strikes on critical junctions, forcing crew members into corridors filled with fire, smoke, and cascading failures. Panic erupted on a scale the Dominion had never encountered, revealing that human ingenuity was far more terrifying than raw strength. The drone's intrusion was more than a tactical maneuver. It was a psychological weapon. Dominion officers could not comprehend how a single vessel could bypass every layer of their defenses, manipulate multiple subsystems at once, and coordinate attacks that affected both their flagship and their supporting fleet. Each failed maneuver, every misfiring system, and every cascading failure amplified the terror that had begun to spread after the drone's initial strikes in the outer system. The flagship, once a symbol of Dominion superiority, now drifted helplessly, a vessel where command was rendered meaningless and coordination impossible. Surrounding ships faltered, hesitant to act, unsure whether the anomalies were isolated or systemic. The human drone had become the epicenter of a storm that no Carvel could escape. Meanwhile, the drone continued to relay real-time data to Terran orbital defenses, creating a network of interdependent operations that magnified its impact across the inner system. Satellites adjusted firing angles to exploit vulnerabilities identified by the drone. Railguns and kinetic projectors struck at weak points, and graviton pulses were timed to disrupt propulsion systems precisely when Dominion vessels attempted evasive maneuvers. The entire human defensive network acted as an extension of the drone, each station, battery, and ship executing orders with the speed and foresight that only a human-guided intelligence could coordinate. The Dominion's superiority in numbers and firepower was rendered irrelevant as each attack, each disruption, and each precision strike systematically dismantled their formations. They were no longer fighting humans. They were being manipulated by them, outmaneuvered by ingenuity distilled into a single, seemingly fragile vessel. By the time the flagship's command systems collapsed completely, the Dominion fleet was in disarray. Orders were delayed, communications scrambled, and strategic cohesion dissolved into chaos. Ships attempted to regroup, but found themselves funneled into kill zones, targeted by coordinated orbital strikes and swarming drones, all orchestrated by the same human drone that had infiltrated their command vessel. The psychological impact was devastating. The Dominion realized they had underestimated humanity, not just as a species, but as a force capable of turning even its smallest elements into decisive weapons. One drone, seemingly insignificant, had altered the battlefield, destroyed their flagship, and shown that human ingenuity and adaptability could not be measured by conventional metrics of strength. As the inner system stabilized under Terran control, humans did not celebrate, they prepared. Engineers repaired orbital defenses, recalibrated railguns, and reinforced stations, while pilots and soldiers recovered from near-impossible engagements. Yet the presence of the drone, as both scout and tactician, became a legend in real time, its exploits studied and adapted for the next phase of conflict. Humanity had demonstrated that even the smallest, most fragile-seeming asset could wield influence far beyond its size, turning vulnerability into advantage and improvisation into lethal strategy. The Dominion had underestimated the species' ingenuity, and the cost of that miscalculation had been catastrophic. The drone, silent, precise, and relentless, had proven that human adaptability could penetrate the heart of any fleet, and in doing so had irrevocably changed the nature of the war. The galaxy would never again view humanity as fragile, because fragility, when guided by intelligence, instinct, and ingenuity, had become unstoppable. The Dominion fled, scattered across the void, leaving behind the wreckage of pride, arrogance, and the illusion of invincibility. Yet humanity did not celebrate immediately. Across Mars, Earth, Luna, and the outer colonies, humans were already engaged in recovery, repair, and strategic reassessment. Terran engineers worked tirelessly to restore orbital batteries and railguns, recalibrate shield matrices, and repair stations scarred by minor skirmishes. Pilots returned from missions that had pushed vessels to their limits, stabilizing sensors, rearming fleets, and preparing for what was inevitably only a temporary reprieve. Soldiers, civilians, and AI-operated drones collaborated in a symphony of survival, each action amplifying the lessons learned from the drone's extraordinary campaign. Humanity had faced annihilation and had responded not with panic, but with adaptation, unity, and ingenuity, turning survival itself into a weapon capable of reshaping a war. The drone, once just a small, nearly invisible scout, had become the symbol of this transformation. Its actions were studied, replicated, and integrated into human defensive doctrine, Fleet commanders debriefed its maneuvers, engineers analyzed its operational protocols, and tacticians encoded its strategies into training programs for every warship, orbital defense station, and planetary outpost. Its improvisation in chaos had revealed the full extent of human potential when guided by ingenuity, anticipation, and adaptability. One machine, imbued with human instinct and intelligence, had orchestrated the collapse of an entire Dominion vanguard, demonstrating that even the smallest element of humanity could wield influence far beyond its size. Humanity's victory was not defined by the number of ships destroyed or the territory held, but by the realization that ingenuity, courage, and relentless creativity could redefine the battlefield. Across Seoul, the psychological impact of the drones' campaign reverberated in ways the Dominion could never anticipate. Civilians on Earth and Luna witnessed, through real-time feeds, the precision, audacity, and effectiveness of Terran resistance. Children watched pilots navigate debris-laden voids and satellites execute coordinated strikes in perfect harmony. Engineers and soldiers repaired battered installations alongside volunteers, understanding that their resilience, adaptability, and creativity were weapons in their own right. Mars, battered but unbowed, became a hub of repair, reinforcement, and innovation. Its orbital stations and planetary defenses upgraded with insights harvested from the drone's extraordinary feats. Even the most remote colonies on Ceres, Titan, and Europa contributed to a coordinated effort that amplified humanity's ability to endure and retaliate, proving that fragility, when unified and intelligent, was not weakness but a crucible forging strength. The Dominion's retreat was more than a tactical failure. It was a revelation. They had assumed fragility equated to weakness, that human mortality, unpredictability, and emotionality rendered the species a minor nuisance in the galactic theater. Yet they had underestimated the power of ingenuity distilled into its purest form, a small, precise, adaptive force capable of reshaping the outcome of battle. One human drone had infiltrated their flagship, disrupted their fleets, and coordinated attacks across the inner system, leaving no Dominion ship unscathed by its influence. The Dominion's misjudgment had been catastrophic. The lesson was seared into every surviving officer, commander, and fleet member. Humans could transform vulnerability into power, improvisation into strategy, and ingenuity into weapons. The galaxy had learned, perhaps for the first time, that underestimating humanity was a fatal mistake. As the dust of battle settled, humanity prepared for the inevitable next encounter. Ships were repaired and retrofitted, orbital defenses fortified, and colonies reinforced. Fleet commanders adapted their strategies to incorporate the drone's insights, ensuring that future operations would not just survive, but thrive. The drone itself became both legend and practical instrument, continuing to operate, scouting, coordinating, and demonstrating that a single, small machine could alter the balance of power across the system. Its actions were a proof of principle. Ingenuity, determination, and adaptation were more formidable than raw strength alone. And as human fleets resumed patrol across Sol, ever watchful, ever vigilant, one truth was undeniable. Fragility had not limited humanity, it had defined it. Every failure had been a lesson, every limitation a challenge to overcome. One human drone had entered the war, and in doing so, humanity had revealed its greatest strength, the capacity to turn vulnerability into power, improvisation into strategy, and the smallest spark into a force capable of reshaping the galaxy. The Dominion would return, yes, but they would return forever changed, aware that they faced not a fragile species, but one capable of adapting, surviving, and striking with precision that no empire could ever ignore. Humanity had proven, with a single machine, that fragility was not weakness, and that the true measure of strength was not in size or firepower, but in ingenuity, courage, and the unbreakable will to endure.